Hey y'all, welcome back to Made It Out to the Polls, our voter education series in collaboration with ElPAC. We flew to my home state of Texas to sit down with Lauren Ashley Simmons, who's a political organizer running for the state representative of District 146 in Houston. What is a political organizer? Here is singer-songwriter Chelsea Cutler eating deviled eggs to explain.
A political organizer is someone who brings people together to work towards a common goal related to politics. They might help a candidate win an election, support a specific issue, or advocate for change in government policy. They often do this by door knocking, organizing events, and getting people to vote.
I really think you guys are going to enjoy today's conversation. Lauren and I talked about how religion can be used as a weapon to pass anti-LGBTQ laws. Here is Made It Out to the Polls. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course. In your time as an organizer, have you seen Christianity and family values being weaponized against the LGBTQ community?
Absolutely. And it's very frustrating to me because as much as people don't realize it, like I go to church all the time. Like I grew up at Trinity United Methodist Church in 3rd Ward. And, you know, that's just not the version of Christianity that I grew up with. Like I went on mission trips every year. We did outreach to unhoused people. We're called the Friendly Church. And so seeing what, like, I guess I want to say like TV or political Christianity is, it's so antithetical to what I know our faith is, and it's frustrating. And I hate that this right-wing kind of like conservative movement has done such a good job of kind of like claiming this as ours, because when you read the Bible and even what you know about Jesus, I was like, this all conflicts, with what the doctrine says. Like, this is not what we should be doing. We should not be targeting people. We should not be legislating our faith. There's a verse in the Bible that even literally tells you about worshiping in private and being modest in your faith and not being a zealot. And so we always talk about like slippery slope rhetoric, but I'm like, y'all, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible. Like, that's not where we need to start pulling laws from. But it gives an argument that really doesn't have a lot of validity to it some weight. You can't give me a real reason why same-sex people should not be able to marry or adopt, or why a child, shouldn't have access to the care that they need, or, why a trans person shouldn't be able to, join the military or something, because I think that was like a ban during like the Trump administration. You don't have to give me like a logical or a scientific or a really good answer, but you can just, kind of say, hey, well, this is what my faith says.
Right.
And that's treated, as a solid argument, and you don't have to go beyond that. And I think it's really unfair because for me, Christianity informs the work that I do as an organizer. My faith is, combined with my experiences is why I do this work.
Yeah.
I want to reach people. I want to make sure people have what they need. I want to make sure that people can live and have joy. And I know in our society, being able to take care of yourself, being able to make, living wages and have access to health care and being able to retire, that matters. And so that's how I approach this work. And so I just think it's really, it's frustrating to see. I'm, really excited to see kind of like there's like this movement with the presidential election, like evangelicals for, Kamala. And I think that's like a step in the right direction. But yeah, we have some work to do to kind of like reclaim what our faith means to us and what, what you believe, but how we're supposed to show up in the world as Christians. And it's not by pointing the finger and harming people and making them feel less than. Because think about the weight of that. Like, as a queer person, you're just like, yeah, the creator of the universe like hates your guts. And you're just like, oh, like even worse than like a murderer, or is that all the same?
Yeah.
When, and none of that, it doesn't even make sense. And I'm not a Bible scholar, but what I've been able to interpret in the conversations that I've had with like my own pastor about this journey that I'm on as an elected official and the weight and the accountability. Like, we have read verses in scripture about the expectation to me to do this job and do good for my people. And so there's so many ways that we could be amplifying those teachings, if people are wanting to seek that out without this like really regressive kind of bigoted language that just does the opposite of what we should be doing as Christians.
Yeah. I actually grew up in Dallas. I'm not from there. I'm from Chicago, but I moved to Dallas at a young age. Mm-hmm. And I remember not having any experience with church and then being kind of plunged into church culture and like mega church culture.
Southern Baptist.
Woo! It was a lot. And I grew up with this understanding that Christianity is very hateful. And it is tied to this kind of very right-wing, agenda. And it took me getting out of Texas, moving to LA, and having my own understanding and kind of, the spiritual awakening and having my own understanding of religion and what it actually is, and separating that from the Bible is actually a beautiful book. And it has so many good teachings. And it's such a shame that these people have gotten a hold of it and are able to just take it in a way that truly is so opposite, and they are weaponizing it. And it just speaks to everything that you just said. It's just like, whoa, when you step back and take an objective view, you're like, holy shit, that is not what that book is trying to say.
And I'm always just like, what I kind of like my little like joke that I kind of make with people as I'm trying to like organize and talk to them, because a lot of like labor organizing is talking about like cultural issues, like about like why, anti-Blackness or being anti-LGBT is actually like a hindrance to like the progress we need to make. But I always tell people, it's like, you think God is like, making sure that birds can tweet and that the sun is coming up every day and going down every night, and that he really cares that much? Like, if a kid is wearing a dress, or if two ladies are getting married, like I just think that there's bigger things, right, in this universe that need to be kind of overseen and watched over than those very like little. I don't want to say they don't matter, but it's not what they're trying to make it. And I really think that it's about being able to command those conversations, and the ones of us who don't think like that, being able to push back. And I do. A lot of times I was like, I'm not going to let y'all have control and command over something that has helped me become the person I've become today. And it's not fair, and I don't like it. And it's gross. Like, find something else. Like, find another justification. Just stand on business, stand up in it, and just say, look, like, I don't like seeing two guys kissing, and it bothers me. But don't like whip out the Bible and try to like give me some. No, just it's weird, because you're not. I was like, I can show you some verses about like making sure that people have enough food to eat, and I don't think you don't agree with that at all. You don't care about that at all. So
right, yeah. If you're gonna pick one message, you have to care about all of them. You can't just pick and choose.
And again, like I said, there are people who are able to kind of, like I say, that weaponization. They do a very good job of creating enough memes and quick videos and posts where people can feel armed to be able to kind of argue and justify. And I said, if you really like sat down and took some time from a spiritual perspective to like be in prayer, I think you would get a different message, and you would probably get a different, set of marching orders. Because there are some people who really need some love and support and some help, and that's not it. That's not doing it.
Right. You've spoken out against a lot of these attacks on the LGBTQ community that are coded as policy. Let's get into that real quick. What are some of these anti-LGBTQ policies? Here's actor, singer, songwriter, Broadway star, Tony nominee, and Grammy winner Kathryn Gallagher icing a rainbow cake to explain.
There are many anti-LGBTQ laws and policies in place across the United States. These can vary widely from state to state, and they have a huge impact. For example, restroom restrictions. In several states, laws have been passed forbidding folks to use the restroom best associated with their gender. Sports bans. Many states have passed laws excluding trans youth from participating in sports. Academic restrictions. Some states have laws or policies in place that limit the inclusion of LGBTQ+ discussion or history in school curriculum, even going so far as to ban books on these topics. And last but certainly not least, gender-affirming care bans. Many states have passed laws that ban access to life-saving healthcare for trans youth.
Can we talk about some of the policies and what's the intent behind them?
I think a lot of it, what it boils down to is, and we're going to get into partisan politics here, but a lot of it, I think, because these things are not just happening in a vacuum in Texas. Why this stuff is so dangerous in Texas is because we're such a large state. And, how Texas goes is how the nation goes. And so we have to be really intentional about making sure that we are putting up a blockade to keep people safe. But we're seeing this in Florida. We're seeing it in Mississippi. We're seeing it in pretty much anywhere where Republicans have control. And what it really boils down to, and we can even see this, in the national platform with the presidential race, is that they really don't have a platform that appeals to regular, everyday working people. When you go knock on doors and you talk to voters, most people are talking about the things that impact them on a daily basis. The fact that every time it rains, this ditch in front of my house floods, the potholes in the street, the bus not coming on time, or there's not a bus shelter when I go stand. Like, the things that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and then it kind of goes deeper into, I can't afford my medication, groceries are expensive. It's hard to find work, college is expensive for my kid. And when you look at what they're offering, there's nothing there for regular working people. But what they can do and what they've become really good at is scaring the shit out of people. Scaring you about your Black neighbor, or your Latinx neighbor, or your trans neighbor. It's making you fear everybody around you, so you're not paying attention that these people have absolutely nothing to offer. And what they do have to offer is kind of weird. And so when you look at it from that lens and frame it that way, then it makes sense that they're going to go after one of the most vulnerable communities, which is trans children, because it doesn't do anything to improve anybody's lives. Your rent is not going to go down because trans kids can't access health care. But it's a win for them. It's a law that got passed. And now you're focused on the scaremongering around, we're cutting kids' genitals off versus being able to say, my school district's been taken over. I can't afford to live in Houston proper. Why don't we have online voter registration? Like, things that would just make life easier.
Right.
You're focused on this. And so I had somebody say, well, there can be conversations had about the science. And I said, I don't want to get into that. Like, I'm not a doctor.
Right.
These are medical decisions. Same with abortion. These are medical decisions that should be, that's a conversation between you and your doctor. I'm an organizer. I don't need to be involved in that conversation, and I'll be a legislator. I don't need to be involved in that. And so seeing kind of what we're seeing, and I say that these things are nonsense, but I don't mean in a way to dismiss how dangerous they are, because they are dangerous.
Right.
We've had families that have had to leave this state. And even within that, the burden that has been and the emotional toll, you have people who literally can't afford to do that.
Right.
They don't have the resource. They don't have the access to be able to find a new job in a different state and pack up and move. And so you're looking at, again, people who have already a mountain on top of them, trying to navigate and understand and get the health care that they need, or just be safe in a place like Houston, in a state, like Texas. And then you think about the other side, where we have billions of dollars in surplus money, and we're not paying teachers, we're not funding public education. We have the highest rate of uninsured people. We have hospitals closing in rural towns in this state. And you think about, like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we spending our time on?
Yes, I love all of this. I want to kind of dissect it a little bit more. I want to go back for a minute and understand what the actual laws are. Can you explain to us what is a book ban? What is the denial of gender-affirming care and the bathroom laws?
Yeah, so basically what we're doing is we are making it difficult for people to live in the way that is most comfortable and express themselves in a way that they need to be able to thrive. And so the ban on gender-affirming care is something, and for one, people don't even really understand kind of what gender-affirming care is. And so even having that conversation right there and being able to explain, it's different methods and different ways to affirm somebody's gender that are not all, medical. Sometimes it's just your doctor acknowledging that your kids wants to use certain pronouns. And again, I am not a doctor. I've done my own research, but it's really about taking people's access and autonomy away to say, hey, this is the healthcare that I need, and this is how should be best delivered and administered to me. And again, removing the expertise of people who are seeking the care, but also the people that we entrust, like doctors, to be able to make those decisions.
Right.
The book ban, for example, is something that I think is ridiculously silly, but it does help to kind of fan the flames for this culture war, because we're saying that you're banning books that, are centering, and it could be anything, but what they're going after are books that, make mention or center like LGBT characters or have, elements that I guess fall outside a very like narrow norm or what we consider a norm, when it's really about making sure that people feel seen in stories. You think about a person like me who has, spent years up until my adulthood really figuring out what my identity means, what it means to be a Black queer person, and being able to have a variety of mediums like stories and TV shows and movies and things to be able to say, okay, people like me exist, is really important. But it's being treated as something that this is like we're indoctrinating kids. Like we are trying to somehow manipulate children into, becoming something that they're not, when what this does is it makes it safe and it helps people understand. Even books, some of the books that, are getting a lot of this stuff is taken out of context. We talk about like child abuse, sexual assault. Children sometimes don't know what's happening to them is wrong, but there are stories, there are books that are available to them in the library where they read something, and it might seem a little graphic, and it might seem, like, oh, this is going over a kid's head. But if you're a kid that's being abused, you're already exposed to it anyway. Right. And so being able to read a story like Push, because that's the one that gets, and it was adapted into the movie Precious, but that's the one that kind of gets like, oh my God, there's a really graphic scene, but what that story is affirming is that shouldn't have happened to that child. Right. And so imagine where you're a kid where this type of abuse is presented as a norm to you, and you read something that says, actually, that shouldn't have happened, that shouldn't be happening to you. Right. And so what we're doing is we're making it, harder for people to protect, and kids to protect themselves and to be knowledgeable about things. But it creates this conversation where the other side is saying, oh, you just want porn in the schools. And, nobody wants to hurt children. Nobody wants to be seen as a person that's harming children. And so it removes the nuance. It makes it a hard conversation to have, because you're saying, well, there's sex in the books. And what we're saying is, within context. And there's been situations where there was this like really conservative school board trustee in one of these places who ran on the platform of like, there's porn in the books. And she said when she started to actually read the books in those passages that were taken out of context, she's like, oh, this is not just, exposing our children to like a sex scene. This is something like in a broader context that could keep kids safe. And so
it's access to language.
It's access to language, access to safety. It's access to even empathy and because you may not be being abused. But like Vice President Kamala Harris, she said she wanted to be a prosecutor because one of her friends was being abused. Right. And being able to empathize and understand that, even if it's not happening to me, it's happening. And those people that are being victimized need protection. Right. Right. So I think about, what the policy does on its face, and it, makes it harder for teachers to teach and do their jobs. But it also really puts kids in harm's way, and just like not being able to access gender-affirming care. What happens to that kid that can't afford that? They can't access that care anymore. So the law, it exists. So now those children have no access to that, and their parents can't seek out the best options for them. What is that kid supposed to do? Are they not trans anymore? Like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? And so I, won't even try to get into the minds of why the people who create these laws and craft these pieces of legislation and kind of push these things as a platform, other than it's a way for them to not have to offer their base anything, but to give them something to be riled up about. Right. Because we've seen it. It becomes this issue of they're hurting children, and what the families that are impacted by these laws are saying, like, wait, I'm trying to do the best thing to keep my kid alive. I'm trying to make sure that my kid has an opportunity to become an adult. And, you're not allowing me to make those decisions. And, we talk a lot about parents' rights, but where does that stop and that start?
Yeah. And I don't think that people really understand how this does affect a parent or a teacher, and how now they're put in this position where, if a kid talks about how they have two same-sex parents at home, the teacher can't give context for that, or they're in this weird situation where they don't know what they can and can't talk about, or now parents are being reported for giving their kids gender-affirming care, and everybody, it's kind of like this, like you're being watched or you're being monitored.
In a state where our leadership talks a lot about being small government and being able to live your life and liberty and all of those things. But what does that look like when you're, a person of color, a Black person, a queer person, a disabled person? What does that look like when the government has a very, very real presence in your life and there are laws on the books that impede your ability to live freely? And like I said, it's not one of those things I think that can be fixed, obviously, and solved overnight, because there's a lot of conversations that need to be had. There's a cultural shift that needs to happen. But also, I really think a lot of this stuff is not nearly as popular as we are being led to believe. Because again, when you talk to regular everyday people who are not super dialed into politics, they're not on social media like that, they really care about the things that impact them the most. And when you have conversations with people about, because they may hear the fear mongering around like gender affirming care for kids, because we did it on the doors. We had conversations with folks and explained what it was, and people would be like, oh, I don't like that, I don't think that's okay.
Right.
Like, we were in, the southeast side of our district, which is a predominantly Black, older district. And when you talk to people about, what that means for a parent to not be able to access that health care and what might happen to that child and what that family would have to do, I remember a lady said, well, Greg Abbott can't come in my house and tell me how to raise my children. And I said, you get it.
Right.
You get it. You don't have trans kids, but you understand what it means to be able to make those autonomous decisions about your kid.
Right.
And so when we have those conversations, you can even see it right there that this stuff is just not attractive, but it's loud. It gets a lot of media attention. And because it is something that is so deeply personal and it does impact the people who are most, who are targeted by it, it becomes a really, I want to say overinflated issue, but it becomes a really big issue that needs to be dealt with, because now we have to go to the Capitol and testify. And now we have to drag our children here so you can see them and understand that trans children deserve to live, when we could really be doing anything else but that.
Right. You mentioned earlier that people are fleeing southern states, and they are. We actually looked it up, and it's literally the biggest migration in 100 years. And a lot of these people are wealthy and they're white and they can afford to do so. But what happens to the families that can't and are stuck in places where they're under attack?
I mean, it's trying to figure out how do you stay safe in a place that's hostile to your literal identity and existence. And I think about, and it was something I was talking about with my friend who's a history professor, just like the migration patterns of Black folks. So how there's like, Black folk in Texas, Black people in Texas, a lot of us have family in California. A lot of Black folk in Mississippi have cousins in Chicago, because that's where we migrated. We left southern states, and for opportunities, for safety. But I remember Emmett Till's mom was quoted, and I'm going to butcher it. I'm not going to say exactly how she said it, but basically what she said is, I thought some of those, what happened to my son couldn't happen in Chicago. And he was, ultimately murdered when he went to go visit the South, went to go visit his family. But she was like, I thought I was removed from some of that because we were in a different place. This is a different environment. And so I think about, what does that mean today for people who are queer and leaving places like Texas and Louisiana, that, the folks with privilege can leave. And I don't want to diminish the fact that it's burdensome, because when I started running, I actually talked to some families who left because I wanted to hear from them first. And I didn't want to go out and talk about their stories and use it as, a part of my platform and my pitch to people without really getting a real understanding of what that meant, to leave everybody that you love behind, for the kids in your child's classroom to not see their friend anymore, to have to go and find a new job and a new community and a new church and a new grocery store. But also the very real fear that this will follow me, that it's happening now in the South. But what if we get the wrong presidential administration? We already have an extremely conservative, activists in a way, Supreme Court. This could happen in California. This could happen in New York if we're not careful. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to tell people, I don't want to say it's a false sense of security, because I think people who have had to make that move and make that decision, it's very real and present for them. But it's almost as if the folks that are still here, I don't want to say are safer, because they're not, but they can deal with the boogeyman that's in front of them right now. I worry about the folks who have moved, and if we don't make the right decisions in this country, that these very real attacks can come for them. But yeah, you think about being in poverty, think about being a person who's disabled. You can't, where are you going to go?
Yeah. Where
do you go to be safe and to live? I will never forget being able to sit down and talk to, like I said, one of the families who had left. And that was one of the next things that she said. She said, I feel guilty because we left people behind. She said, I have friends who don't know how they're going to get what they need for their children. She said, we have friends and family whose children are not out, and we're worried because they're getting the care, but people don't know those kids are trans. We've been doxxed. And so even for the people who have left and been able to, and find and access the care that they need for their kids, they still think about the folks they left behind. Yeah. And we're pushing people even deeper into the margins, because it's not just you not wanting to access the gender-affirming care that you need. Now you're thinking about every time you go to the emergency room and you have to fill out a form and they ask for your sex, or they ask what medications you're currently on, because, it's all of those things.
Yeah.
Or when you're at school and your enrollment card says this, but you've been telling everybody to call you this, and now somebody's reporting you. That's an everyday burden, in addition to everything else that's already hard, to having to pay rent, to having to pay bills, right, to having to be a person of color, to having to be, yeah.
You bring up a good point that I think a lot of times people, when they think about politics, they're like, why should I care? It's not happening to me. I don't live in the South. But this is a real life example of why we need to care, because it's not just going to stop, when you're in the South. This could become a new reality for the entire country.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we see it here all the time, that this stuff doesn't stay put. The Supreme Court cases that change federal law a lot of times start here, mm-hmm, in Texas or Mississippi. And so we have to really, really think about what that means for our country when places like Texas, are able to pass laws that have this type of impact, because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's done with that intention, because this is a laboratory. Like, before it hits, the Supreme Court, they've been practicing and doing this stuff and almost like taunting and challenging and wanting, this to be taken up so it can be ruled on and have an even bigger impact. When I was thinking about the abortion fight right now that we're having, I got my tubes tied when I was 28 years old in 2015, right after I gave birth to my daughter. And we still had Roe, but it was because of how hard it was becoming to get an abortion in Texas and all the hoops that you had to go through. And knowing what I know about my family's history, for example, my mom and my grandmother both, had difficult pregnancies. They, had stillborns and miscarriages. I was like, what? It could be very dangerous for me to get pregnant again. Mm. And I need to make sure that doesn't happen, because I won't be able to, there's a possibility I wouldn't be able to access the abortion care that I needed, should I. And that was when we still had, Roe versus Wade, and now we don't because of what happened in the South.
Yeah.
And things and laws that have been in place and been on the books. And so when people, will say, well, why do you still live in Texas, or you should move? I'm like, for what? We're just delaying the inevitable if we don't
Act
and stand on something here and try to do what we can to push back. And so I tell people, you should care about what happens in Texas. You should care about what happens in Florida and Mississippi and Alabama, because what starts here, it spreads.
Wow. For queer people who live in states like Texas where they're under attack, and especially for queer youth, I think tomorrow can sometimes feel impossible. What is your message for these kids?
Tomorrow may feel impossible, but it's not. And that you're needed here. Your community needs you. Your family needs you. And the world needs your story and its fabric. And I think about some of the hardest times in my life. I think about times where I was trying to figure out who I was and what I cared about and what I valued. And it was some of those traumas that I experienced. And not to say that, you should have to go through something to be able to have a hero's journey, but helped me become the organizer that I am, helped me become the parent that I am, helped me become the person that I am. And you're valuable. And I hope that when you get on the other side of this, that you're able to take those experiences and be a light in someone else's life and make something out of those times. Because again, I hate the trope that, everything happens for a reason, and things do happen, but you didn't deserve, and you don't deserve what you're feeling. You don't deserve to be hurt. You don't deserve to be bullied, but just do what you can to get through and make somebody's life a little bit lighter. That's like you.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I just started thinking about the things that I needed somebody to tell me.
Totally.
When I was feeling like, who would care if I wasn't here anymore? Or, does it matter if I'm taking up space?
Yeah.
So.
How can people be involved with your campaign? Where can they find you?
So we're on social media. I'm going to forget my own social media tags, but it's so my website to find out more about my policies and platform. My platform and things that I care about and who's endorsed our campaign is LaurenAshleySimmons.com. So my whole name. I'm L.A. Simmons TX146 on Twitter. I still call it Twitter. Instagram. We're on Facebook. Lauren Ashley Simmons for state rep in House District 146. You can. I'm an organizer, so I feel like my cell phone number is written on the bathroom wall. Everybody anywhere can always get in contact with me. But yeah, reach out to us on social media. We, are getting back into the swing of things for the general election. So we'll be phone banking, calling folks. If you want to sign up to volunteer, we would love that. And also, because I am a candidate and I've been doing this so long, and campaigns are so expensive, I have to make a money act. So if you're able to make a donation to our campaign, please do that. And you can go on our website to do that. But in all seriousness, no, please engage with us on social media. If you're in Houston and you see it's happened a couple of times where people will be in a grocery store and I'm like, I'm voting for you. And I'm like, oh, that's so weird. But because I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. But no, yeah, we want to interact and engage with people and meet them where they are. And really, just act as a bridge, especially for our district, act as a bridge between regular people and government.
Yeah.
Because we want people to be engaged and we want people to feel like their voices matter.
This series is in collaboration with ElPAC, as you know. Mm-hmm. Can you explain why organizations like ElPAC are so important and what a contribution can actually do for a campaign like yours?
Absolutely. ElPAC, organizations like ElPAC are extremely important because they intentionally seek to support candidates who are oftentimes discouraged from the process and are not in the room, and they are underrepresented, and they make sure that voices like mine are informing policy and adding perspectives a lot of times that just aren't present. And so to be able to do that work is hard, and it's expensive, and it's tedious, and the amazing people who make all the great things happen at ElPAC, are overworked and stretched way too thin. And so being able to support organizations makes it a little easier to have people like me who have so many reasons to not run for office, well, so many barriers to running for office, but so many good reasons to actually do so. And so I'm so appreciative of ElPAC because they were one of the very first organizations to really, kind of jump in and put skin in the game. And, we touted that endorsement, proudly because it was an organization that, is extremely valuable in politics. And it was like, hey, this group is behind me and supporting me. And, also to amplify, there are other candidates like me who, ElPAC could support. And there's an organization like this that can help you. Yeah. And it helped me to not feel alone. It helped me to not feel isolated. And so I really am, immensely grateful. And I want to make sure that this work that ElPAC is doing continues, because we got to go find more queer women candidates and non-binary candidates to make sure that those voices are heard in the room.
Yes. I'm so grateful to you for being here today. And as a queer woman from Texas, I'm grateful for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm always like, when people want to talk to me, I'm like, about what? Like, what do I have to say? But no, I ElPAC was extremely instrumental in helping us get over that really tough primary. I was taking on an incumbent who had been in office since 2017, who was, who had gained notoriety from about giving a 12-minute speech on the House floor when she voted for, banning access to gender-affirming care. She voted for a book ban. She, really especially after the first race, really leaned into some very, very, violent anti-LGBT rhetoric. And so being able to have the support of an organization like this to flip this seat, because it was in Democratic hands before, so it's a primary, but to be able to flip this seat and move into a different direction and to have the community say this is not something that we support and this is not a person that we want representing us meant a lot. But it was that very early foundational support that we got from ElPAC that kind of helped us, do this really big thing.
Yeah. That's amazing. Everybody, please go check out Lauren. Get involved with what's going on in her campaign in Texas. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much. This was great. Thanks.
Our game is you haul or you ghost. Okay. It's basically red flag or green flag.
Okay. You haul or you ghost. I like that.
They're perfect. They're perfect in every way. Okay. But this one weird thing.
Okay. Oh, gosh. Okay.
They eat a pound of brisket every day.
Every single day?
Every single day. And for breakfast.
For breakfast? But they're great in every other way.
Every way. But they're eating brisket for breakfast.
You said a pound?
A pound. They are like meat eater.
And see, I'd have to ghost because and I'm thinking about like my beautiful whirlwind romance being cut short because you're having a heart attack. Like after like a daily diet of brisket. And I love brisket. And I'm doing like this plant-based thing for a while, and that's been like one of the hardest things because I'll like dream about like brisket. And, like ribs and stuff. So yeah, but I don't want to have to bury I don't want to have to bury you early. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to ghost.
That's fair. I think I agree with that one. This series is a collaboration between Made It Out Media and ElPAC. This episode was produced by Matilde Jordan, Jacqueline Taboni, and Michelle Atwood. This episode was edited by Matilde Jordan with cameos edited by Amber Rivera. Thank you to our cameo guests, Chelsea Cutler and Kathryn Gallagher. Tune in next Tuesday, October 15th for our final episode of To the Polls with special guest Allie Krieger. Allie and I talk about the importance of representation in all spaces from the soccer field to the Oval Office.
Greg Abbott will not continue to take our rights. We won't stop the fight.